Hala Rharrit, thank you so much for joining us on UpFront.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Hala, you've had an extensive career in U.S. Foreign Service. Last week, you became the first career diplomat to resign over the United States' policies toward Israel, particularly the continued assault on Gaza. Now, Israel's siege, of course, has led to the deaths of more than 34,000 people, and it's destroyed much of the territory. After 18 years in the State Department, how did you arrive at this decision?
Honestly, Mark, it was an agonizing decision. I never intended to resign. When I joined the Foreign Service, I expected it to be my career for the rest of my life, really, until retirement. But unfortunately, the president's Gaza policy made it absolutely impossible. It was an indefensible policy. It is a violation of international law, of domestic law. And in good conscience, I could not continue amplifying this policy because, for one, it hurt U.S. national security interest, and I was able to document that, and it was clear that that was the case throughout the Arab world. It was also causing a generational cycle of violence. As you noted, the devastation for the Palestinians, but also it failed to achieve any objectives to keep Israelis safer or get the hostages back. It was a failed militaristic policy. It continues to be a failed policy, and I could not, in good conscience, stay within the system and promote this policy.
Israel has begun its invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah. In March, U.S. President Joe Biden had called Rafah invasion a red line for the United States, that it was a step too far that would prompt a U.S. response. Now that Israel has crossed that red line, do you think that the Biden administration is going to change its current stance?
I certainly hope so. And I have to say that Benjamin Netanyahu announced the invasion of Rafah right after Secretary Blinken was wheels up from his trip to Israel, where he again reiterated the U.S. position that they should not go into Rafah, considering the civilian population. But this is the frustration that's been with this policy this entire time. It's been just words. And diplomacy is an art, and you have to use your leverage. And we haven't used any of the leverage that we have on Israel. We keep on using the same rhetoric over and over again, hoping for a change. And we continue to not see that change. As a matter of fact, we continue to see the situation get worse. As a spokesperson, I was receiving the talking points, and over again, they were the same. We are gravely concerned. We are concerned for the civilian casualties. There comes a point where you need to take action on that concern. And it is clear that despite U.S. warnings, nothing is happening on the Israeli side in terms of holding back on Rafah. And so it is time now for President Biden to take action. Words are no longer sufficient. Now is the time to leverage our influence by conditioning military aid, at the very least cutting offensive weaponry in line with U.S. law.
You know, at this point, there are many people who will look at the recent developments. For example, this week it was reported that the U.S. has halted the delivery of munitions to Israel. There are people who say, well, this is just a superficial move, or this is just public relations, that they're still going to trot out those talking points that you mentioned, that there's still going to be empty promises and leaked, statements about Biden's backdoor debates with Netanyahu. But at the end of the day, the status quo is going to maintain. How hopeful are you that things are changing, and or not?
Listen, Mark, it's very difficult. I want to be hopeful. I want to believe that they're going to take tangible steps. But at the same time, I've been in the service long enough to know that I'm not going to hold my breath until I actually see action. The hold was significant, but it was also a drop in the bucket. And it wasn't a policy shift. There continues to be rhetoric coming out of the White House and out of the department saying that we're going to continue and we're going to amplify military assistance. Now is not the time for that. The administration needs to wake up and realize this militaristic policy has been a failure on all fronts.
Help me understand something, though. Just in that vein, yes. Right? If it's unethical, if it's inhumane, all the people are dying. If it is bad for U.S. Security interests, if it is bad for Israel's interests, these are all the things you've just said. Why are we continuing with the status quo?
That's the million-dollar question, right? because there's been ample analysis coming from the field, and this is public knowledge at this point, from diplomats, not just me, but from multiple sources. And even if beyond the US government, I mean, from practically every single international organization calling for a sustained ceasefire, yet the Biden administration and President Biden himself continues to insist on this policy. Our role as diplomats is to provide information to Washington that helps guide policy, but clearly the foreign policy is being made elsewhere. I fundamentally believe that our system domestically has issues. Politicians should not be able to profit from war, for example. The people deciding whether or not we send military assistance to a foreign country should not be the ones also getting campaign contributions from the arms industry or from lobbying groups that represent foreign governments. As a diplomat, I had to have an open book. My life was a complete open book. They know everything about us, rightly so, because we're serving the people, we're serving the country. We can't be making any profit off of our work personally. We're doing everything we're doing for the country and for the people of the United States. It should be the same for our politicians. And as a diplomat, I could not help be super frustrated with the realities of our domestic political process and its undue influence on our foreign policy.
Speaking of policy, internal criticism of U.S. policy is not necessarily new. In fact, you've said before that robust discussion is what leads to change. It's what keeps the wheels turning. It's the norm. With respect to the situation in Gaza, however, you've mentioned that officials are afraid to voice disagreement against the prevailing policy. Why is there a kind of climate of fear around this issue?
Because it's coming from the top down, directly from the top down. And when there's a situation like that, which in my 18-year career has been unprecedented, it's very difficult to shift things or even provide a contrarian analysis. So when I voiced concern repeatedly, I was silenced, I was sidelined, there were actions taken against me. It has a chilling effect.
What kind of actions were taken against you for pushing back against U.S. policy in Gaza?
I mean, I was given an ultimatum: get back on air or curtail, which means leave the position that you're currently in, go serve somewhere else, or potentially resign. A lot of people came to my support when that happened and tried to defend me and say, no, we absolutely need you in the role that you're in. We need this critical feedback. And what you're providing, the analysis from the Arab world, is going directly to senior levels, the most senior levels of government, and keep it up. But at the same time, not even our messaging posture was changing. Nothing was shifting. So I began to feel like I was enabling the policy, even though I was refusing to do interviews because I was documenting the backlash that those interviews were generating on pan-Arab media. I still wasn't able to maintain in that role.
So when I hear about your ordeal, when I hear about your resignation and the reason why, I'm left to wonder, and I know many people watching are left to wonder, is it even possible to change U.S. foreign policy in Israel from within?
Look, I don't want to be hopeless. We are seeing a lot of churn within the department, clearly, and within the interagency. There was supposed to be a determination today from the department to Congress whether or not Israel was violating human rights. That submission has been delayed indefinitely, which I wonder why. But there are a lot of good people in the department trying to do good work and trying to push back on the administration in ways that we're advocating for the United States at the end of the day. That's our job. We're advocating for US interests. So what our role is to help the secretary or the president make informed decisions. And we're doing everything we can to do that. But at the end of the day, they have to make the call and they have to take action, not just change rhetoric.
Hala Rharrit, thank you so much for joining us on UpFront.
Thank you so much, Mark.